In the depths of space, where silence should reign supreme, a single human word would shatter everything the galaxy thought it knew about Earth's children. When Commander Sarah Chun intercepts an alien transmission containing just one impossible syllable spoken by a captured human, she realizes that humanity's greatest secret isn't their technology, their weapons, or their resilience. It's something far more terrifying and beautiful than any alien species could imagine. What happens when the hunters become the hunted? Not through force, but through a truth so profound it rewrites the very fabric of galactic civilization. The answer lies in a word that should never have been spoken, by a man who should never have been captured, in a place where hope should never have existed. But humans have always specialized in the impossible. The mining vessel Determination drifted silently through the asteroid field, its hull scarred from countless expeditions into the dark reaches of space. Captain Marcus Webb stood at the bridge's viewport, watching his crew work the extraction equipment with practiced efficiency. After 15 years of deep space mining, he had learned to read the subtle signs that separated a routine operation from disaster. Today, something felt wrong. The asteroids in this sector were rich with rare Earth elements that Earth's expanding colonies desperately needed. Webb's crew had been working this field for 3 months, sending automated cargo drones back to human space while they pushed deeper into unexplored territory. It was dangerous work, but the pay was exceptional, and Webb's team consisted of volunteers who understood the risks. "Captain, I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures about 2 clicks off our starboard bow," reported Lieutenant Lisa Park, the ship's sensor officer. Her voice carried the calm professionalism of someone who had spent years learning to deliver bad news without panic. Webb moved to the sensor station, his weathered face reflecting the blue glow of the displays. The energy signatures showed a pattern he had never seen before, too regular to be natural, too alien to be human technology. "Any match in our databases?" "Negative, sir. The configuration is completely unknown. It's almost like they're scanning us, but the wavelengths are unlike anything we've encountered." Chief Engineer Rodriguez joined them at the console, wiping grease from his hands with a worn cloth. "Could be some kind of automated probe left behind by one of the non-aligned species. We're pretty far from charted space." Webb nodded, but his instincts were screaming warnings. In his experience, unknown contacts in deep space rarely brought good news. "I'll stop, retract the mining equipment, and prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. I want us ready to run if things go sideways." The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency, but before they could complete their preparations, the ship's hull rang like a struck bell. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red as systems throughout the vessel began failing in rapid succession. "We're caught in some kind of tractor beam," Park reported, her fingers flying across her console. "I'm reading multiple contacts closing on our position. Captain, these aren't ships from any known species in the galactic database." Through the viewport, Webb could see them now, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around their edges, making them difficult to focus on directly. Their design was elegant and predatory, like deep-sea creatures evolved for hunting in the darkness between stars. As they drew closer, the alien ships revealed their true size. Each one dwarfed the Determination by a factor of 10. "Sir, they're hailing us," Communications Officer Chen announced, her voice tight with tension. "The signal is coming through on multiple frequencies simultaneously. It's definitely artificial, but I can't understand the language." "Put it through the universal translator," Webb ordered, though he suspected their software wouldn't be able to parse an entirely unknown linguistic structure. The bridge speakers crackled to life with sounds that seemed to bypass human hearing and resonate directly in their bones. The universal translator struggled for several seconds before producing a stilted approximation. "Vessel of the young species. You will submit to boarding. Resistance will result in termination." Webb felt his blood turn to ice. First contact with an unknown alien species was supposed to be a moment of wonder and possibility. Instead, it felt like standing before an executioner. "Open a channel." This is Captain Marcus Webb of the human vessel Determination. We are peaceful explorers engaged in legal mining operations. We request safe passage through your territory. The response came immediately, and this time the translator rendered it with chilling clarity. There is no safe passage for your kind. You have entered the hunting grounds of the Zephyrian Collective. Your vessel and crew are now property of the Huntmaster. The tractor beam's grip tightened, and Webb watched helplessly as a ship was drawn toward the largest of the alien vessels. The Determination's hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to endure, and several minor systems failed as they were pulled into what appeared to be a massive hangar bay. "Captain, should we resist?" Rodriguez asked, his hand hovering over the weapons console. Webb looked around at his crew. 12 good people who had followed him into the unknown for the promise of adventure and profit. Their mining vessel carried only basic defensive systems, nothing that could seriously threaten ships of this size and apparent technological sophistication. Negative. Stand down all weapons. We'll have to play this by ear and hope we can negotiate our way out of whatever we've stumbled into. The hangar bay was enormous, easily large enough to accommodate dozens of ships the size of the Determination. As their vessel settled onto the deck with a metallic clang, Webb could see other captured ships arranged in neat rows. Vessels from species he didn't recognize, their hulls bearing scorch marks and obvious signs of struggle. Atmospheric pumps hissed as the hangar was pressurized, and soon Webb could see figures moving toward their ship. The Zephyrians were tall and lean, with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between different shades of blue and purple. They moved with predatory grace, and their faces held an expression of cold intelligence that made Webb's skin crawl. "Attention, crew of the human vessel," came a new voice through the communication system. "You will exit your ship immediately. Any attempt to resist or conceal weapons will result in immediate termination. You have 60 seconds to comply." Webb activated the ship's internal communication system. "All crew, this is the captain. We're going to do exactly as they say. Stay calm, stick together, and remember your training. We've been in tight spots before, and we'll get through this one too." As they prepared to disembark, Webb caught Park's eye. She was younger than the rest of the crew, barely 25, and on her first deep space assignment. "Lisa, whatever happens, remember that Earth needs to know about this. If any of us makes it back, the colonies need to be warned." She nodded, her jaw set with determination despite the fear Webb could see in her eyes. The airlock cycled open, and the crew of the Determination stepped into their new reality as prisoners of an alien species that viewed them as nothing more than hunting trophies. As they were herded toward what was obviously a processing area, Webb began planning. Somewhere in this massive ship, there had to be a way to escape, or at least send a message home. The Zephyrians separated the crew into individual holding cells, and Webb found himself alone for the first time since the capture. The cell was small, but clean, with a transparent aluminum wall that allowed him to see similar cells stretching away in both directions. Some contained members of his crew, others held aliens from species he didn't recognize. Hours passed in silence before a new figure approached his cell. This Zephyrian was different from the others. Older, with elaborate markings carved into its skin and eyes that held an unsettling depth of intelligence. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of absolute command. "I am Huntmaster Vexthal. You and your crew are now specimens in my collection. Your species shows promise as quarry. Your ship's defensive maneuvers demonstrated cunning, if not skill. However, before you can be released into the hunting preserve, we must determine your capabilities and limitations." Webb forced himself to remain calm. "What exactly do you want from us?" "Information. Your species is new to this region of space, and we know little about human psychology, physiology, or tactical thinking. This knowledge will make the eventual hunt more entertaining for my clients." The casual way the alien discussed hunting humans like animals made Webb's stomach turn, but he kept his expression neutral. "And if we refuse to cooperate?" Vexthal's laugh was like grinding metal. Refusal is not possible. We have methods of extracting the information we require, though cooperation would make the process less unpleasant for you and your crew. Over the following days, Webb and his crew were subjected to a series of tests and interrogations. The Zephyrians were thorough and methodical, documenting everything from human reaction times to psychological breaking points. They seemed particularly interested in human capacity for problem-solving under stress and their social bonds with fellow crew members. Webb tried to give as little useful information as possible while keeping his crew alive and unharmed. He quickly learned that the Zephyrians respected cunning and determination, viewing these qualities as desirable traits in their prey. The more impressive the quarry, the higher the price their wealthy clients would pay for the privilege of hunting them. It was during one of these interrogation sessions that Webb first learned about the scope of the Zephyrian operation. They weren't just random pirates or raiders. They were part of a sophisticated enterprise that captured sentient beings from across the galaxy and sold hunting experiences to the highest bidders. Your species has already gained something of a reputation, Vexthal informed him during a particularly lengthy session. Word of human unpredictability and resilience has spread through certain circles. Several of my most valued clients have expressed interest in acquiring human specimens. Webb felt sick. How many other ships have you captured? From your species? Only 2 others, though neither crew survived the initial hunting trials. They were disappointing, but your crew shows more promise. The way your people work together, their willingness to sacrifice for one another. These traits make for exceptional sport. That night, lying in his cell and watching the stars will slowly pass the hangar's massive viewport, Webb made a decision. Even if he couldn't save his crew, he had to find a way to warn Earth about the Zephyrians. Humanity needed to know that there were predators in the darkness between stars, beings who viewed them as nothing more than exotic game animals. But first, he had to figure out a way to escape from what was clearly one of the most secure facilities in this part of the galaxy. As he began planning, Webb couldn't shake the feeling that the Zephyrians had made one crucial mistake in their assessment of humanity. They had assumed that being captured meant being defeated. Webb smiled grimly in the darkness of his cell. They were about to learn just how wrong that assumption could be. 3 weeks into their captivity, Webb had learned to read the rhythms of the Zephyrian hunting facility. The guards changed shifts every 8 hours. The feeding cycles were precisely timed, and the interrogation sessions followed a predictable pattern. He had also discovered something the Zephyrians didn't know he knew. Their universal translator had a fatal flaw. The device was designed to handle complex linguistic structures, but it struggled with emotional context and cultural nuances. More importantly, it recorded everything for later analysis, creating a comprehensive database of prisoner communications. Webb realized that if he could access this database, he might find a way to coordinate with other captive species without the Zephyrians understanding the true nature of his communications. His opportunity came during a routine maintenance cycle. Chief Engineer Rodriguez had been moved to a work detail, helping to maintain the facility's environmental systems. During one of their brief encounters in the corridors, Rodriguez managed to slip Webb a small piece of modified circuitry. Pulled this from their diagnostic port, Rodriguez whispered as they passed each other. Might be able to interface with their systems if you can get close enough to a terminal. That night, Webb waited until the guard rotation and used the makeshift device to access the translator's database through a maintenance port in his cell. What he found there changed everything he thought he knew about their situation. The database contained communications from dozens of captured species, each filed according to the Zephyrians' assessment of their hunting value. But, buried within the linguistic analysis files, Webb discovered something extraordinary. There were patterns in the communications, subtle repetitions, and coded references that suggested some of the prisoners weren't just random victims. A ship's crew from the Andorian Confederacy had been communicating in military tactical codes. A group of Centauri merchants had been using commercial encryption protocols to coordinate activities. Most shocking of all, Several different species seemed to be working together, sharing information and resources despite being held in separate sections of the facility. Webb realized he was looking at evidence of an organized resistance movement operating within the Zephyrian hunting preserve. The question was how to make contact without revealing his discovery to their captors. The answer came from an unexpected source. During his next interrogation session, Vexthal introduced a new element to their psychological profiling: exposure to other prisoners under stress. Webb was brought to an observation chamber where he could see other captives being subjected to various tests and challenges. It was meant to gauge human empathy responses and identify potential weaknesses that could be exploited during a hunt. But what Vexthal didn't realize was that he had just given Webb a way to communicate with the resistance. In the observation chamber, Webb watched as a Regellian captain was forced to solve increasingly complex puzzles while being subjected to various stress factors. The alien's movements seemed random at first, but Webb began to notice a pattern. The Regellian was tapping out a code with his fingertips, a modified version of basic galactic maritime signals. Webb memorized the pattern and began responding with subtle gestures of his own. To the Zephyrian observers, it would look like normal human stress responses. But to anyone who knew what to look for, he was announcing his presence and requesting information. The response came during his next observation session. A Tausetian engineer was working on a seemingly impossible mechanical problem, but her tool movements spelled out a message in basic mathematical sequences. Human vessel detected 3 days ago. Crew status unknown. Resistance active. Await further instructions. Webb's heart raced. There were other humans in the facility, and they were already in contact with the resistance. But who could they be? His crew had been the only human vessel captured, as far as he knew. Over the next several days, Webb established regular communication with the resistance network. He learned that the facility held nearly 200 prisoners from 37 different species, all of them supposedly being prepared for hunting expeditions. But about a quarter of those prisoners were actually members of various intelligence agencies, military special forces, or exploration services who had been captured while investigating the Zephyrian operation. The resistance had been building detailed intelligence about the facility's security systems, guard rotations, and, most importantly, the location of a communications array that could reach friendly forces. They had been waiting for the right moment to attempt a mass breakout, but they needed something more than just escaped prisoners to bring down the entire operation. They needed proof of what the Zephyrians were doing, and they needed a way to ensure that their escape would lead to swift retaliation against the hunting preserve network. During one particularly intense session, Webb finally learned the identity of the other human prisoners: Commander Sarah Chun and Lieutenant David Park. No relation to his crew member Lisa, had been captured while conducting a deep reconnaissance mission for Earth Defense Command. They had been investigating reports of missing human vessels in this sector when they stumbled into the same trap that had caught the Determination. But Chun and Park weren't ordinary military personnel. They were members of Earth's most classified unit, the Deep Space Intelligence Division. They carried knowledge that could revolutionize humanity's understanding of the galactic political landscape. And, more importantly, they knew things about Earth's defensive capabilities that could not be allowed to fall into enemy hands. The Zephyrians had no idea what they had captured. They saw 2 more human specimens for their collection. They didn't realize they had inadvertently declared war on one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. It was during the 4th week of captivity that everything changed. Webb was being subjected to a new type of stress test when the facility's alarm systems suddenly activated. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red, and he could hear the sound of weapons fire echoing through the massive structure. Vexthal appeared at the observation chamber's viewport, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. It seems some of our specimens have become unruly. No matter. The security systems will handle any disturbance. But as the minutes passed, it became clear that this wasn't a simple prisoner uprising. The weapons fire was too coordinated, too professional. Someone with military training was leading an assault on the facility's security forces. Through the chamber's communication system, Webb heard fragments of tactical chatter in a language the universal translator couldn't parse. But he recognized the rhythm and cadence. It was human military code, transmitted in a cipher that Earth Defense Command had developed specifically for deep space operations. Chun and Park weren't just trying to escape. They were conducting a full-scale military operation from inside the facility. The observation chamber's doors suddenly exploded inward, and Webb found himself face-to-face with a woman in improvised combat gear. Commander Sarah Chun was smaller than he had expected, but her eyes held the cold focus of someone who had been trained to operate behind enemy lines. "Captain Webb, I presume," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. "We need to move. The Resistance has opened a window, but it won't stay open long." As they raced through corridors filled with emergency lighting and the acrid smell of weapons discharge, Chun briefed Webb on the situation. The Resistance had been planning their breakout for months, but they had accelerated the timeline when they learned about the arrival of Chun and Park. "The Zephyrians made a critical error," Chun explained as they navigated through a maze of maintenance tunnels. "They assumed we were just another captured crew. They didn't bother with proper security screening." They emerged into the main prisoner holding area, where Webb was amazed to see his entire crew alive and armed with weapons obviously taken from Zephyrian guards. Rodriguez was working frantically at a control panel, while both Parks, he realized, provided cover fire against advancing security forces. "Captain," Lieutenant Lisa Park called out as she spotted him. "Rodriguez has found a way to override the hangar bay doors. But we need someone who knows the determination systems to get her flight ready in less than 10 minutes. Webb looked around at the chaos. Prisoners from dozens of species working together with military precision, improvised weapons, and tactics holding back one of the galaxy's most sophisticated security forces. It was impossible, and yet it was happening. "What about the other ships?" he asked Chun as they reached his crew's position. "That's the beautiful part," she replied with a grim smile. "We're not just escaping. We're stealing their entire collection." The plan was audacious beyond belief. The Resistance had spent months learning the facility's systems and had discovered that all the captured vessels were kept in flight-ready condition. The Zephyrians' clients sometimes wanted to hunt their prey in familiar environments, which meant the ships needed to be functional. More importantly, the facility's computer systems contained detailed records of every hunting expedition, every client transaction, and every captured vessel. If they could extract that data, they would have evidence of the largest illegal hunting operation in galactic history. But as they fought their way toward the hangar bay, Webb realized something that made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians weren't fighting back with the intensity he would have expected from guards protecting such a valuable facility. Their resistance was fierce, but not desperate, tactical, but not all out. They were herding the escapees toward the hangar bay. Webb grabbed Chin's arm as they reached the massive doors. "Commander, this feels like a trap. Why aren't they using heavy weapons? Why haven't they sealed the hangar bay?" Chin's expression darkened as she considered his words. Around them, the various species were racing toward their captured vessels, each crew working to prepare their ships for immediate departure. The scene looked like victory, but Webb's instincts were screaming warnings. "You're right," Chin said finally. "But it doesn't matter. We can't stop now. Whatever they're planning, we have to play it through and hope we're faster than they are." As the Determination's crew worked frantically to prepare their ship for departure, Webb watched the hangar bay's massive viewport. Beyond it, space seemed empty and peaceful, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched by something vast and patient. The first ships began launching, their engines creating brilliant streaks of light as they accelerated away from the facility. Webb's crew was among the last to depart, and as they cleared the hangar bay, he finally understood what the Zephyrians had been planning. The facility wasn't just a prison, it was a trap within a trap. The easy escape had been deliberately orchestrated, and Now dozens of ships filled with escaped prisoners were scattered across local space, exactly where their captors wanted them. It was then that Lieutenant Park detected the massive energy signatures closing on their position from 3 different directions. The Zephyrian hunting fleet had been waiting in hyperspace, ready to begin the largest hunting expedition in their history. But as Webb prepared to order evasive maneuvers, something happened that none of them could have predicted. Commander Chun activated the Determination's communication system and broadcast a single word on all frequencies, a word that should have been meaningless to any non-human intelligence. Sanctuary. What happened next would be remembered as the moment everything changed in that part of the galaxy. Because that single word, spoken by a human who should never have known its significance, activated protocols that had been dormant for longer than most civilizations had existed. And across space, ancient systems that had been waiting for millennia suddenly came online, responding to a call that had not been heard since the galaxy was young. The response to Chin's transmission was immediate and overwhelming. Webb watched in stunned silence as space itself seemed to ripple around them, reality bending in ways that his instruments couldn't measure. The approaching Zephyrian hunting fleet suddenly found their weapons systems offline, their engines reduced to minimal power, and their communications filled with a voice that spoke in frequencies older than their civilization. Who dares invoke the ancient protocols? The voice resonated through every ship in the area, bypassing their communication systems entirely and speaking directly into the minds of every conscious being present. Who calls upon the sanctuary laws that were sealed when the galaxy was still learning to speak? Webb looked at Commander Chun, who had gone pale despite her professional composure. "Commander, what have you done?" Chin's hands trembled as she checked her instruments, watching readings that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. "I don't know. That word, it was in my briefing materials from Earth Defense Command. They said it was some kind of emergency protocol, but they never explained what it actually meant." Around them, the escaped prisoner ships had stopped their frantic flight patterns and were now drifting motionless, held in place by forces that registered on no known scientific instruments. The Zephyrian hunting fleet, those massive predators that had seemed so invincible just moments before, were being systematically disabled by technology that appeared to operate according to entirely different physical laws. Lieutenant Lisa Park was frantically working her sensor console, trying to make sense of readings that shouldn't have been possible. "Captain, I'm detecting massive structures materializing throughout this entire sector. They're not ships, they're more like installations, or maybe habitats. Each one is larger than anything in our databases." Through the viewport, Webb could see them now, geometric forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human perception could properly process. They appeared to be made of some kind of crystalline material that shifted between different states of matter, solid one moment and translucent the next. Each structure was easily the size of a small moon, and they were appearing by the dozens. The voice spoke again, and this time Webb could sense vast intelligence behind it, an awareness that seemed to encompass not just this moment, but the entire history of the galaxy. "The word has been spoken by a child of Earth. The ancient compact is hereby invoked. Let all who hear this know that the sanctuary laws are once again in effect." On the communication channels, Webb could hear panic spreading through the Zephyrian fleet. Their tactical chatter was being translated by the universal systems, and what he heard made his blood run cold. The Zephyrians weren't just raiders or pirates. They were part of a galactic shadow network that had been operating for thousands of years, systematically eliminating or enslaving any species that might eventually challenge their supremacy. But more disturbing was what he learned about humanity's place in their plans. The Zephyrians had been monitoring Earth for over a century, waiting for the right moment to begin systematic predation against human colonies. The capture of Webb's crew and Commander Chun hadn't been random. It had been part of a larger operation designed to test human capabilities and identify weaknesses before launching a full-scale hunting campaign against Earth's expanding territory. Hunt Master Vexthal's voice cut through the tactical chatter, and for the first time since Webb had met him, the alien sounded genuinely frightened. "This is impossible. The sanctuary laws were sealed away eons ago. No living being knows the activation protocols." The ancient voice responded with what might have been amusement, if beings of such vast intelligence could experience something as simple as humor. "The laws were not sealed, Huntmaster. They were dormant, waiting for the children to grow wise enough to speak the words that would awaken them. The fact that a human has invoked sanctuary suggests that this species has reached the threshold of true galactic citizenship." Webb felt his worldview reshaping itself around implications he couldn't fully grasp. "Commander, are you telling me that humanity has just accidentally qualified for membership in some kind of galactic civilization that the rest of the galaxy doesn't even know exists?" Chan was studying data streams that were being transmitted directly into their computer systems by the mysterious installations. Her expression grew more amazed with each passing moment. "Captain, I think what we've stumbled into is much bigger than galactic citizenship. According to this data, we've just activated a protection system that was left behind by the first sentient species to achieve true interstellar civilization." The information flooding their systems told an incredible story. Millions of years ago, when the galaxy was young and most star systems were still forming, a species called the Architects had achieved a level of technological and philosophical advancement that allowed them to transcend physical existence. Before departing for whatever realm they had ascended to, they had left behind a network of monitoring systems and protective installations designed to safeguard the development of younger civilizations. The sanctuary laws were their final gift to the galaxy, a set of protocols that would activate whenever a developing species demonstrated certain key qualities of wisdom, compassion, and moral development. The specific trigger was complex and multifaceted, but one of the most important elements was the willingness to invoke protection not just for oneself, but for others who were suffering under oppression. Commander Chun had spoken the words sanctuary, not to save herself or even her fellow humans, but in an attempt to protect all the escaped prisoners who were about to be hunted down and killed. That act of selfless protection, combined with humanity's other actions throughout their brief period of galactic contact, had been enough to trigger the ancient protocols. "The assessment is complete," the voice announced. "The species designated as Homo sapiens has demonstrated sufficient moral development to warrant protection under the sanctuary laws. Effective immediately, any act of aggression against human individuals or territories will be considered a violation of galactic law and will be met with appropriate response." The implications hit Webb like a physical blow. In one moment, humanity had gone from being unknown newcomers to the galaxy to being under the protection of the most advanced civilization in galactic history. But protection wasn't the only thing they had gained. The data streams continued to flow, and Webb began to understand that the sanctuary laws didn't just protect developing civilizations. They also provided them with knowledge and technology appropriate to their level of development. Humanity was about to receive the greatest technological advancement in their history, along with detailed information about the political and social structures of galactic civilization. But perhaps most importantly, they were learning about the threats that existed in the darkness between stars. The Zephyrian Hunting Network was just one of many predatory organizations that preyed on developing civilizations. There were slave traders, resource raiders, and worse things that saw young species as nothing more than opportunities for exploitation. The ancient voice began addressing the Zephyrian fleet directly, and Webb could hear the weight of absolute authority behind every word. "Huntmaster Vexthal and the forces under your command, you have violated the fundamental principles of sapient dignity and freedom. Your organization has systematically murdered, enslaved, and tormented beings whose only crime was being born into civilizations younger than your own." Through the communication channels, Webb could hear Vexthal attempting to argue, claiming that the Zephyrians were operating under ancient rites of conquest, and that younger species existed only to serve their betters. His words carried the arrogance of a being who had never encountered a force capable of challenging his worldview. "Your claimed rights are forfeit," the voice replied. "The sanctuary laws supersede all other authorities in this galaxy. You will immediately release all prisoners currently held within your network, cease all hunting operations, and submit to judgment for your crimes against sapient life." What followed was a demonstration of power that left Webb struggling to comprehend what he was witnessing. The massive installations began to glow with internal energy, and space itself seemed to bend around them. The Zephyrian fleet, those predators who had seemed so invincible, found their ships being systematically dismantled at the molecular level. But it wasn't destruction in any conventional sense. The ships were being converted, restructured into something entirely different. The weapon systems became habitat modules. The hunting equipment transformed into medical and educational facilities, and the command structures were rebuilt according to principles that emphasize cooperation rather than domination. The crews weren't harmed, but Webb could see through the communication channels that they were undergoing some kind of fundamental change as well. The arrogance and predatory mindset that had defined Zephyrian culture for millennia was being systematically removed, replaced with understanding and empathy that would make it impossible for them to return to their old ways. "This is rehabilitation, not punishment," the voice explained, seemingly reading Webb's thoughts. "The goal is not revenge, but the prevention of future harm. These beings will be given the opportunity to become productive members of galactic society, but they will no longer be capable of the cruelties they have inflicted on others." As Webb watched the transformation taking place around him, he began to understand that humanity had just been thrust into a conflict that had been ongoing since before Earth had developed complex life. The galaxy wasn't the peaceful, diverse community that Earth science fiction had imagined. It was a dangerous place where advanced civilizations routinely preyed on weaker ones, and where true justice was enforced only by powers so ancient and advanced that most beings had forgotten they existed. But humanity was no longer defenseless. The protection of the sanctuary laws extended beyond simple defense. It included access to knowledge, technology, and alliance networks that would allow Earth to defend not just itself, but other threatened civilizations throughout the galaxy. Commander Chun was studying the technical specifications that were being downloaded directly into their ship's computers. "Captain, we need to get this information back to Earth immediately. The defensive technologies alone will revolutionize our ability to protect the colonies. But more than that, we've just learned that we're not alone in wanting to build a better galaxy." The data included contact information for dozens of other species that had achieved sanctuary protection over the past million years. Each had gone through a similar awakening, learning about their true place in galactic civilization and accepting the responsibility to protect and nurture younger species in turn. Webb realized that humanity was being invited to join not just a galactic community, but a tradition of guardianship that stretched back to the dawn of sentient life in the galaxy. They would have access to incredible power and knowledge, but they would also be expected to use it wisely and compassionately. As the ancient installations began to fade back into whatever dimensional space they normally occupied, the voice spoke one final message. "Welcome to the true galaxy, children of Earth. Use your new knowledge wisely. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, and remember that wisdom without compassion is merely another form of predation." The space around them returned to normal, but nothing would ever be the same. The Zephyrian facility had been converted into a refugee processing center. The hunting fleet had become a humanitarian aid mission, and scattered throughout the sector were dozens of freed prisoners who would carry word of humanity's new status throughout their home civilizations. But as Webb prepared to set course for Earth, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, other predators were watching, wondering what this new development meant for their own operations. Humanity had gained powerful protection, but They had also attracted the attention of forces that preferred their prey to remain defenseless. The real test of humanity's worthiness for sanctuary protection was about to begin. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, but those weeks transformed everything Webb thought he knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The data downloaded from the ancient installations wasn't just technical specifications. It was a complete education in galactic politics, history, and the hidden war that had been raging for millennia between protectors and predators. Commander Chun had established a direct quantum communication link with Earth Defense Command, but the conversations happening in the depths of space were far more complex than simple military briefings. Webb found himself part of discussions with beings he couldn't see, representatives of the Sanctuary Council who were helping humanity understand their new responsibilities. "Your species has developed remarkably quickly," explained a voice that identified itself as Curator Threenix of the Altarian Collective. "Most civilizations require several thousand years of galactic contact before they demonstrate the moral framework necessary for sanctuary protection. Humanity achieved it in less than 2 centuries of spaceflight." Webb was in his quarters, studying star charts that showed the true scope of galactic civilization. What Earth astronomers had identified as empty space was actually filled with hidden installations, protected worlds, and transport networks that connected thousands of civilized species. What made the difference? Why do we qualify when others didn't? "Your species' capacity for empathy across genetic boundaries," replied another voice, this one belonging to Council Member 09 of the Synthetic Commonwealth. "Most species protect their own kind instinctively. Humans routinely risk their lives to protect beings they've never met from species they barely understand. This characteristic is extremely rare in galactic civilization." The education was overwhelming. Webb learned that the galaxy contained over 50,000 sentient species, but fewer than 100 had achieved sanctuary protection. Most civilizations fell into one of 3 categories: predators who viewed other species as resources to be exploited, prey who live in constant fear of stronger neighbors, or isolated communities who avoided contact with anyone outside their immediate territory. Sanctuary-protected species occupied a unique position as mediators, defenders, and teachers. They were expected to use their advanced technology and knowledge to protect weaker civilizations, guide developing species toward wisdom, and when necessary, confront predatory powers that threaten galactic stability. But they were also expected to do so without becoming conquerors themselves. The greatest challenge facing any sanctuary species was maintaining the moral clarity that had earned them protection in the first place. "This is why the selection process is so rigorous," explained Curator Threenix. "Power without wisdom leads to oppression. Wisdom without power leads to irrelevance." The architects designed the sanctuary system to identify species capable of wielding great power while maintaining humility and compassion. As they approached the Sol system, Webb could see evidence of the changes already beginning on Earth. Ships that had been under construction for months were suddenly incorporating technologies that would have been impossible just weeks ago. Defensive installations were appearing around the outer planets, powered by energy systems that operated on principles Earth scientists were still struggling to understand. But the most significant changes were happening at the political level. The revelation that humanity was now under the protection of ancient galactic law had fundamentally altered Earth's relationship with the various alien species they had encountered over the past century. Species that had previously viewed humans as primitive newcomers were now requesting formal diplomatic relations. Trading partners who had offered marginal deals were suddenly eager to establish long-term alliances. Even more significantly, several civilizations that had been planning aggressive expansion into human territory had quietly withdrawn their fleets and begun pursuing peaceful alternatives. Commander Chen joined Webb on the bridge as they entered Earth's orbital space. She had spent most of the journey in deep communication with government officials and military planners, helping them understand the magnitude of what had occurred. "The president wants a full briefing as soon as we dock," she reported. "But, Captain, there's something else you need to know. We're not the only humans who have been in contact with the Sanctuary Council. It turns out that Earth Defense Command has been receiving messages from protected species for months, but they didn't understand what they were dealing with." Webb felt a chill of realization. "You're saying our government knew about this?" "Not exactly. They knew that something had changed in the way other species were treating humanity, but they attributed it to our technological advancement and military capabilities. They didn't realize that we were being evaluated for protection under laws that most of the galaxy doesn't even know exist." The implications were staggering. Earth's leaders have been making decisions based on incomplete information, unaware that their actions were being judged according to criteria they couldn't understand. The fact that humanity had still qualified for sanctuary protection suggested either remarkable luck or instinctive wisdom at the highest levels of government. As they docked with Luna Station, Webb could see the changes already taking place throughout human space. New ships that incorporated sanctuary technology were under construction, defensive systems were being deployed around vulnerable colonies, and, most importantly, Earth was beginning to reach out to other species not as supplicants seeking protection, but as potential partners in building a more stable galactic civilization. The briefing sessions on Earth were unlike anything Webb had ever experienced. The room contained not just human officials, but holographic representatives of a dozen sanctuary-protected species, each offering perspective on how humanity could best fulfill their new responsibilities. Admiral Sarah Kim, head of Earth Defense Command, asked the questions that everyone was thinking but afraid to voice. "What exactly are we expected to do? Humanity has barely established a foothold in this part of the galaxy. How can we possibly take on responsibilities for protecting other species?" The answer came from Mediator Keth of the Centauri Collective, a species that had achieved sanctuary protection nearly 10,000 years earlier. Sanctuary protection is not about immediate action, but about long-term commitment. Your species will grow into your responsibilities as your capabilities expand. For now, you are expected to act according to your nature. Protect those who cannot protect themselves, seek peaceful solutions to conflicts, and never use your new advantages to exploit weaker civilizations. What became clear during these sessions was that humanity had inadvertently positioned itself at the center of a growing crisis. The Zephyrian Hunting Network had been just one tentacle of a much larger shadow organization that had been operating throughout the galaxy for thousands of years. This organization, known as the Dominion Compact, consisted of dozens of predatory species who had formed alliances based on mutual benefit rather than shared values. They divided the galaxy into hunting territories, coordinated their efforts to prevent the development of potential threats, and worked together to suppress any technology or knowledge that might allow their prey species to defend themselves effectively. The Compact has been successful because they operate in the spaces between official galactic civilization, explained Strategic Coordinator Voss of the Regellian Defense Federation. They exploit the fact that most species are too focused on their own survival to coordinate effective resistance. But your species protection under sanctuary law changes that calculation. Webb was beginning to understand why humanity's qualification for sanctuary protection was such a significant development. Earth was located in a region of space that the Dominion Compact had been using as a primary hunting ground for centuries. The presence of a protected species in their territory would severely complicate their operations. More importantly, humanity's rapid technological advancement and natural inclination toward alliance building made them ideal coordinators for a resistance movement among the prey species. With sanctuary backing, Earth could provide protection and resources to civilizations that had been living in fear for generations. But this opportunity came with enormous risks. The Compact had spent millennia building their power base and eliminating threats to their operations. They wouldn't simply accept the loss of their hunting grounds without a fight. There have already been incidents, reported Intelligence Director Park, Lisa Park's father, Webb realized with surprise. 3 human colonies have detected scout ships from unknown species conducting surveillance. Our new sensor systems are picking up signs of increased military activity in compact territory. The Sanctuary Council representatives were taking these developments seriously. Curator Threnix addressed the human leadership directly. The compact will test your resolve and capabilities. They will try to provoke responses that justify retaliation. It is essential that humanity maintain the moral authority that earned you protection while demonstrating the strength necessary to deter aggression. Over the following days, Webb found himself part of planning sessions that felt more like preparation for a galactic war than diplomatic negotiations. Earth's new technologies allowed for defensive capabilities that would have seemed miraculous just weeks ago, but the real strength of sanctuary protection lay in its network of alliances and shared knowledge. Humanity was being introduced to species that had been fighting the compact for thousands of years, civilizations that had developed specialized techniques for resistance, sabotage, and protection of vulnerable populations. The network of protected species wasn't just a mutual defense agreement. It was a sophisticated resistance organization that had been waiting for the right moment to openly challenge the predatory powers. Your species brings something unique to our alliance, explained Guardian Commander Zex of the Tau Ceti Defense Corps. Most of us achieved protection by withdrawing from galactic affairs until we were strong enough to defend ourselves. Humanity earned protection while actively engaging with other species, building relationships across genetic and cultural boundaries. This makes you natural coordinators for a broader resistance movement. But as the planning sessions continued, Webb realized that the greatest challenge wouldn't be military or technological. The Dominion Compact maintained power not just through force, but through a sophisticated system of psychological manipulation that convinced prey species that resistance was hopeless. Billions of sentient beings throughout the galaxy lived in civilizations that had been systematically conditioned to accept predation as a natural part of galactic life. They paid tribute to stronger species, accepted limitations on their technological development, and provided resources and populations for hunting expeditions because they believed they had no alternatives. Changing this mindset would require more than just military victories. It would require demonstrating that a different kind of galactic civilization was possible, one based on cooperation rather than domination, protection rather than predation. This is why the architects established the sanctuary laws, Curator Threnix explained during one particularly intense session. They understood that lasting peace could only be achieved when enough species demonstrated that ethical advancement was possible. Each protected civilization becomes proof that strength and wisdom can coexist. As Webb prepared to return to space as part of humanity's expanding role in galactic affairs, he reflected on how much had changed since that routine mining operation in what he had thought was empty space. His crew had been transformed from simple miners into ambassadors of a new kind of civilization. But he also understood that their real work was just beginning. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Dominion Compact was preparing its response to humanity's new status. The next phase of the conflict would determine whether the galaxy moved toward a future of cooperation and protection, or whether the ancient patterns of predation would continue to dominate galactic civilization. The word sanctuary had awakened powers that had been dormant for millennia. But it had also declared war on forces that had ruled through fear for longer than most species could remember. The outcome of that war would determine the fate of every sentient being in the galaxy. 6 months after the incident at the Zephyrian facility, Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the New Determination, watching the largest gathering of starships in recorded galactic history. Representatives from over 300 species had assembled in the Sanctuary System, a hidden star cluster that served as the headquarters for the network of protected civilizations. But this wasn't a celebration. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy indicated that the Dominion Compact was preparing for something unprecedented, a coordinated assault designed to break the Sanctuary System permanently and establish absolute predatory dominance over galactic civilization. Captain, we're receiving priority communications from the Sanctuary Council, reported his new communications officer, Ensign Torres, who had joined the crew when Earth began expanding its deep space operations. Webb nodded, but his attention was focused on the tactical displays showing compact fleet movements throughout the galaxy. The enemy wasn't just mobilizing military forces. They were systematically eliminating potential allies, destroying neutral civilizations that might support the resistance, and preparing to implement something called the Final Protocol. Commander Chun appeared on the bridge's main viewer, transmitting from the council chambers deep within the sanctuary installation. Her expression was grim, and Webb could see the strain of the past months in her face. "Marcus, the council has made a decision. They're going to tell you the truth about humanity's real significance in this conflict. What we learned about the sanctuary laws was just the beginning." Webb felt his stomach tighten. Over the past 6 months, he had become accustomed to having his understanding of reality regularly restructured, but something in Chin's tone suggested that this revelation would be different from the others. The main viewer shifted to show Curator Threnix, but the ancient being's appearance had changed. The calm, measured presence that had characterized their previous interactions was gone, replaced by something that might have been desperate hope. "Captain Webb, the time for partial truths has ended. Your species' qualification for sanctuary protection was not the random result of moral development. It was the culmination of a plan that has been in motion for over 50,000 years." The bridge around Webb seemed to fade as the curator continued speaking. What he learned in the next few minutes would change not just his understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy, but the entire history of his species. The beings you know as the architects did not simply transcend physical existence. They foresaw the eventual rise of predatory civilizations like the Dominion Compact, and they understood that the sanctuary laws alone would not be sufficient to maintain galactic peace indefinitely. Images began flowing through the communication link, star charts showing migration patterns, genetic analyses spanning millennia, and historical record from civilizations that had risen and fallen long before Earth had developed complex life. Humanity was not a random evolutionary development. Your species was guided, shaped, and prepared for this moment by influences you never suspected. The architects left behind more than just monitoring systems. They left behind gardeners. Webb's mind reeled as the implications became clear. You're saying that humanity was artificially created? Not created, but guided. Throughout your species' development, key individuals appeared at crucial moments. Leaders, inventors, philosophers who pushed your civilization toward greater cooperation and moral advancement. These individuals carried genetic modifications that enhanced their capacity for empathy, strategic thinking, and moral reasoning. The data streams showed a pattern spanning human history. Individuals whose actions had fundamentally shaped the development of civilization, from ancient philosophers who established ethical frameworks to modern leaders who had guided humanity through its first contacts with alien species. But, more importantly, the curator continued, your species was designed to serve as a catalyst. Humans possess a unique neurological structure that allows them to form emotional bonds with beings from radically different genetic backgrounds. This trait is so rare in galactic civilization that most species cannot even conceive of it. Webb thought about his own crew, about the way they had instinctively worked to protect not just themselves, but all the prisoners in the Zephyrian facility. He remembered Commander Chun invoking sanctuary not for humanity, but for everyone who was suffering. This is why your qualification for sanctuary protection was so significant, the curator explained. Most species achieve protection by demonstrating their ability to govern themselves wisely. Humanity achieved it by demonstrating their ability to care for others selflessly. But the revelation that followed was even more staggering. The reason for humanity's unique development wasn't just to create another protected species. It was to create the one species capable of uniting the galaxy's prey civilizations into an effective resistance against the predatory powers. The Dominion Compact has maintained power for so long because they understand that most species are fundamentally xenophobic, explained Guardian Commander Zex, joining the communication. They trust their own kind, fear outsiders, and can be manipulated into conflicts that serve compact interests. But humans form genuine emotional bonds across species lines. You can build alliances that the compact cannot break through manipulation. Over the past months, Webb had seen evidence of this in action. Human diplomats had been remarkably successful at mediating disputes between alien species. Human crews worked seamlessly alongside non-human colleagues, and human colonies had become havens for refugees from compact-controlled territories. But the real surprise came when the curator revealed the scope of what humanity was being asked to do. The Sanctuary Council wasn't just asking Earth to coordinate resistance activities. They were requesting that humanity take leadership of a new kind of galactic civilization. The Architect's final protocol was designed to activate when a species capable of true galactic leadership achieves sanctuary protection, the curator explained. That moment has arrived. The question is whether humanity is ready to accept the responsibilities that come with it. Webb looked around his bridge at crew members representing half a dozen different species, all working together with a harmony that he was beginning to understand was genuinely unique in galactic civilization. What exactly are you asking us to do? The answer transformed his understanding of the conflict they were facing. The Dominion Compact's final protocol wasn't just a military campaign. It was an attempt to prevent the implementation of the Architect's ultimate plan for galactic civilization. Deep within the sanctuary installations, dormant systems contain the blueprints for a new kind of galactic government. One based on cooperation rather than domination, protection rather than predation. But these systems would only activate under the leadership of a species capable of gaining the trust and cooperation of thousands of different civilizations. The Compact knows about the Architect's plan, Commander Chen reported. Their intelligence networks have been monitoring sanctuary activities for millennia, waiting for signs that the final protocol might be activated. Your species' rapid qualification for protection triggered their response. The scope of what they were being asked to undertake was breathtaking. If humanity accepted leadership of the new galactic civilization, they would be responsible for coordinating the activities of thousands of species, managing resources on a scale that dwarfed anything in human experience, and defending not just Earth, but every world where sentient life was trying to flourish. But they would also have access to technology and knowledge that would make such coordination possible. The architects had designed their final protocol to provide everything necessary for successful galactic governance. Communication networks that could coordinate activities across the entire galaxy, transportation systems that would make interstellar travel as simple as planetary flight, and, most importantly, decision-making frameworks that could balance the needs and interests of radically different species. The choice is yours, the curator said, but understand that refusing this responsibility means accepting the continuation of the current system. The Dominion Compact will eventually break the sanctuary network through attrition, and galactic civilization will continue to be dominated by predatory powers. Webb made the decision without consulting Earth's government, though he knew they would approve. It was the kind of choice that could only be made by someone who had seen firsthand what the galaxy looked like from the perspective of the prey species. We accept. What followed was the most remarkable transformation in galactic history. The dormant architect installations throughout the galaxy suddenly came online, revealing a hidden infrastructure that connected every star system where sentient life existed. Communication networks that had been waiting for millennia began transmitting messages of hope to prey species that had never imagined escape from their oppression. The technological transfer was immediate and overwhelming. Earth's defensive capabilities expanded exponentially, but more importantly, human diplomatic missions were suddenly able to offer real protection and assistance to civilizations that had been suffering under compact rule for thousands of years. But the Dominion Compact's response was swift and brutal. Fleets that had been massing for months launched simultaneous attacks against sanctuary installations throughout the galaxy, attempting to destroy the new galactic infrastructure before it could fully activate. The war that followed would be remembered as the last great conflict between predator and prey civilizations. But it was also the first war in galactic history where the prey species fought back with genuine hope of victory. Humanity's role in the conflict was unlike anything in military history. Human commanders didn't just coordinate military operations. They served as bridges between species that had never been able to work together effectively. Human diplomats didn't just negotiate alliances. They created emotional bonds that transcended genetic and cultural differences. Most importantly, human civilians throughout the galaxy became living examples of what the new civilization could offer. Human colonies welcomed refugees from dozens of different species. Human crews worked alongside aliens with a harmony that inspired other species to attempt similar cooperation. And human leaders consistently chose protection over profit when faced with difficult decisions. The turning point came when Webb, now Admiral of the Galactic Defense Fleet, led a combined force of over 1,000 species against the compact's Central Command facility. The battle itself was won through superior technology and coordination, but the real victory was the sight of beings from across the galaxy fighting together for a common cause. When the compact leadership finally surrendered, it marked the end of an era that had lasted for over 100,000 years. But more importantly, it marked the beginning of something new, a galactic civilization based on the principles that humanity had brought to the stars. The word that Commander Chun had spoken in that desperate moment at the Zephyrian facility had awakened more than just ancient protection systems. It had awakened the possibility of a galaxy where strength was used to protect rather than exploit, where diversity was celebrated rather than feared, and where every sentient being had the opportunity to reach their full potential. As Webb stood once again on the bridge of his ship, now looking out at a galaxy where former prey species were building new civilizations free from fear, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple mining operation in what he thought was empty space. But empty space, he had learned, was never truly empty. It was filled with possibilities, with ancient dreams waiting to be awakened, and with the potential for transformation that lay dormant in every act of compassion. The hidden truth about humanity's place in the galaxy had been revealed at last. They were not conquerors or explorers or even protectors in the traditional sense. They were gardeners, cultivating the conditions necessary for galactic civilization to flourish according to principles that transcended the ancient cycle of predator and prey. And in that role, they had finally found their true purpose among the stars.